The Department of Cannabis Regulation, also known as DCR, is transforming its website into a more user-friendly online information and resource center. We have comprehensively redesigned our website to streamline, simplify, and make more accessible information related to licensing and the social equity program. All videos and resources on the website are for informational or guidance purposes only and may be updated from time to time as information becomes available. The information contained in these videos, forms, and other resources is subject to change without notice and does not replace or supersede the requirements contained in the Los Angeles Municipal Code or the rules and regulations. DCR encourages all applicants to conduct their own due diligence and seek legal or business advice if necessary.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raina Plummer, and I'm a PR specialist for DCR. And I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning for our Phase 3 Retail Round 1 Applicant Workshop. There will be a lot of great information shared today. During today's workshop, you all will hear from Executive Director Kat Packer, Assistant Executive Director Jason Killeen, and Social Equity Program Director Dr. Imani Brown. I will now pass the presentation over to Director Packer to provide additional information about today's workshop.
Thank you, Ms. Plummer. Good morning to everyone who is joining us today for today's workshop for Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants determined eligible for further processing. I'd like to welcome you to today's workshop and thank you for your continued engagement with DCR as we work to continuously improve our licensing and social equity program. First, I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage everyone to continue to follow public health and safety protocols established by the state, the county, and the city of Los Angeles to ensure that we do our part to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. As the spread of COVID-19 in LA is currently at threat level red, this means staying at home as much as possible and minimizing contact with others as much as possible. Just earlier this week, the mayor issued a revised, targeted, safer at home order, which acknowledges that the coronavirus is widespread in our community, and the latest data from the Los Angeles County Department of Health shows more Angelenos are infected with COVID-19 now than ever before. With this in mind, and for more information on the Safer at Home order and information on how to stay safe during this crisis, please visit corona-virus.la. Again, corona-virus.la. Due to COVID-19, this workshop is being conducted virtually to ensure the safety of both staff and participants. Furthermore, this workshop is being live streamed on our website at cannabis.lacity.org. This virtual event is being recorded and will be posted on our website under the About the Department menu on the newly established DCR's event page early next week. Second, I'd like to articulate that I recognize that many of those joining today's workshop are eager to learn more about the temporary approval process and next steps that may be required to receive authorization to operate. We hope to provide as much information today in our presentation as possible, and we commit to continuing to provide resources to assist you in the license application process. Today's presentation is specifically for the 200 Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants determined eligible for further processing via Phase 3 Retail Round 1. We recognize that for many of you, this process has taken much time and effort. And although we recognize that there's still much work to be done, the department takes great pride in the progress we've made through meeting this milestone, whereby through the city's social equity program, the nation's largest cohort of social equity applicants, all of which were verified under eligibility criteria, are moving forward in the application process. I will now pause for a moment so that we can get the presentation back up. One moment, please. All right. Again, today's presentation is specifically for the 200 Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants determined eligible for further processing via Phase 3 Retail Round 1. This cohort of social equity applicants will have access to programming and resources currently being developed by the department, which will be shared later on in today's presentation. Today's presentation will cover an overview of online licensing resources and will focus on information regarding Phase 3 Retail Round 1 and the related temporary approval process. We will discuss briefly the process by which we determined applicants eligible for further processing, walk specifically through the temporary approval process to include highlighting key resources and a walkthrough of required forms and documents. And we will also discuss application modifications that Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants may request, such as changes to ownership or changes to the business premises location. We will also take time to answer a few questions that were submitted by Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants in anticipation of this workshop. And we will conclude with information from our Social Equity Program Director, Dr. Amani Brown, about resources and programming that is available to Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants. I will now hand things over to Assistant Executive Director, Jason Colleen, who will present on the topics previously mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Packer. And for those of you who are joining us today, welcome. First, I'd like to begin by highlighting the department's redesigned website, which can be found at cannabis.lacity.org. In September of this year, the department unveiled a redesigned website that sought to simplify and make more accessible information related to the licensing program and social equity program. On the redesigned website, applicants, licensees, and prospective applicants can find many new established resources under applicants and licensees, as well as sign up for DCR's listserv, register to receive official Cannabis Regulation Commission communications, and learn more about the city's licensing and social equity program. I'd like to begin by highlighting some of these resources. Next slide. The redesigned website includes a dedicated licensing menu. To access our licensing menu, first visit the website at cannabis.lacity.org, then choose the licensing menu at the top of the page. Here you can see our submenus, including the licensing information submenu. To access these materials, select the licensing information submenu. The drop-down menu will guide applicants to various pages with related information. The licensing menu also has submenus dedicated to news and updates, as well as inspections and compliance. Resources found under the licensing menu are intended to assist applicants with these license application processes. Next slide. Shown here are just a few of the resources that can be found under the licensing menu. The first is a workflow that DCR has developed to assist applicants step-by-step through the temporary approval process. Next is an information and procedure bulletin, which provides greater detail on the process, including applicant responsibilities, actions that will be taken by DCR, and related instructions. DCR has also created a number of video tutorials to walk applicants through the process and highlight key points within the workflow and information procedure bulletin. I encourage Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants to read through and review these resources in their entirety, as they contain required and important information related to the temporary approval process. Next slide. As Director Packer mentioned previously, all 200 Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants were first verified under eligibility criteria for the social equity program related to income, residency in a disproportionately impacted area, or cannabis-related enforcement, either arrest or conviction, based on state of California related records. All of these criteria were based on the original eligibility criteria established by the City Council. On December 2nd, 2020, DCR concluded its review of Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants in accordance with Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 104.061B and identified 200 eligible Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applications for further processing. The 200 applicants that received a determination of eligibility for further processing are now eligible to apply for temporary approval and begin the temporary approval process, which is the focus of today's presentation. An applicant with temporary approval is required to follow all applicable rules and regulations, as would be required if the applicant held a non-temporary license of the same type. Applicants that complete the temporary approval process will receive temporary approval to engage in commercial cannabis activity within the city. Next slide. The list of all 200 applicants that are eligible for further processing as part of Phase 3 Retail Round 1 has been posted on DCR's website. The department has made the list of all of the applications with their corresponding status available under the Social Equity Program menu application processing page. Illustrated on the right is a screenshot of the list, which contains all 802 Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applications. Illustrated on the left is a screenshot of the list, which just contains the 200 applications determined eligible for further processing. Next slide. More than anything, today's presentation seeks to help applicants learn how to locate and utilize information and resources related to the temporary approval process. Today's presentation will not cover every step involved in the temporary approval process, nor will it cover every resource. However, we hope to be able to direct applicants to existing online resources and clarify how these resources can assist applicants through the process. As such, applicants should review both the application procedures and resources page, as well as the forms and documents page in their entirety to identify information needed to proceed through and complete the temporary approval process. Two important resources that I will briefly highlight are the temporary approval workflow and the temporary approval information and procedure bulletin. Both documents were designed to assist applicants to better understand their respective responsibilities and the related requirements to receive a temporary approval license. Next slide, please. DCR has developed several tutorial videos to help licensees and applicants. These videos show prospective and current applicants, as well as licensees, the various licensing processes, related forms, and documents. The video tutorials are located under the Licensing Information submenu as its own Video Tutorials page. All videos on the website are for informational purposes only and may be updated from time to time as information becomes available or processes are updated. DCR has created a video tutorial dedicated entirely to the temporary approval process. This video highlights important information contained in the related workflow and information procedure bulletin. Next slide, please. The temporary approval bulletin, as well as the application forms and documents page, has the additional information on what forms and documents are required to be submitted as part of the temporary approval process. On the slide that's currently showing, you can see all of the forms that are associated with the temporary approval process, as well as different documents that are required. DCR may ask for additional information or other forms at any time as part of this application process. It's important for applicants to provide the information in a timely manner to assist DCR in processing your application. Again, these resources can all be found on the Application Procedures and Resources page and the Application Forms and Documents page under the License Information submenu. Next slide. I would like to next review what information is necessary to allow DCR to review information related to the equity share compliance. As a reminder, all social equity applicants, which includes the 200 Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants, are required to comply with the various equity share requirements of the Los Angeles Municipal Code. Today's presentation will not provide an in-depth review of these documents and requirements, but will instruct applicants on where and how to access resources which provide greater clarity. The first resource that I would like to highlight is the screenshot shown on the left, which is the Social Equity Program Entity Eligibility Verification Procedure Bulletin. Although all 200 social equity applicants have been verified as having an individual who meets the eligibility criteria, local law requires that the entity applying for a license also meet certain requirements to ensure that the verified social equity individual applicant owns the appropriate equity share in the entity applying for a license. The Equity Program Entity Eligibility Verification Procedure Bulletin provides guidance on what information must be submitted to DCR and the related requirements. A few requirements highlighted in this bulletin include, but are not limited to, all Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants must provide any information necessary to demonstrate equity share compliance. Social equity individual applicant owners must complete and submit their SEP owner compliance attestation. Non-SEP owners must also submit an owner compliance attestation. Applicants must also comply with the ownership percentage requirements and ownership and disclosure requirements. Applicants must include an equity share addendum, which I will describe in the next slide. And lastly, applicants are required to keep records evidencing compliance with equity share requirements. Again, the information I'm providing is a brief summary of some of the requirements. It is not an exhaustive list. And as such, applicants are encouraged to thoroughly review the equity share and social equity program entity eligibility verification procedure bulletin in its entirety for a complete listing of related requirements. Next slide, please. Equity share compliance. As mentioned in the last slide, all applicants must incorporate the following addendum into operating agreements or other relevant documents to evidence compliance with equity share. The addendum reads as follows. To the extent that any provision of this agreement or part thereof is or may be construed to be inconsistent with or in violation of the equity share requirements set forth in the Los Angeles Municipal Code section 104.20, such provisions shall be ineffective, unenforceable, and null and void. During its review of required temporary approval documents, DCR will review all equity share related information. Please be advised that DCR's review is for license purposes only and shall not constitute or be construed to be any official form of certification and or legal proclamation concerning parties and or their rights between and amongst each other. Next slide, please. Now that we've reviewed the information required in a temporary approval application, including related forms and documents, as well as the documentation to evidence compliance with the equity share requirements, I will now review what happens after applicants submit this related information. First, I'd like to do a quick review of the workflow. You can see that the workflow illustrates steps taken by the applicant, DCR, and other agencies within the temporary approval process. As all 200 applicants have received a determination of eligibility, which is located in the first box, applicants are now at the point where they are authorized to submit temporary approval application information and required documents. Applicants that have a status of awaiting data entry have the ability to upload all of the additional temporary approval documents to their Excel record. Applicants that also have the ability to submit a modification record through the Renew or Modify button. Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants have already been invoiced and paid fees associated with the temporary approval and pre-application process. At this point, no additional fees will be due unless an applicant is requesting a modification or the applicant has received their temporary approval license and is moving forward into the annual application process. You will see the boxes associated with invoicing and payment of related temporary approval invoices have been X'd out on this workflow because it doesn't apply to folks that have already paid their initial application fees. Once an applicant uploads forms and documents and any other information related to the temporary approval process, their assigned analyst will review documents for completeness. If an applicant is missing documentation or there are questions about information submitted in the application, your assigned analyst or other staff will reach out and seek additional information. All information must be submitted on the current forms available on DCR's website. Forms that were made available in 2018, 2019 are not appropriate for the current temporary approval process, and staff will ask you to update your forms and resubmit them. Once an application is determined to be complete, Applicants can progress through the next steps in the temporary approval process, which includes applying for and receiving their state license, completing and submitting any required indemnification agreements, and completing any required inspections, like an initial inspection from DCR or an inspection for fire life safety from the Los Angeles Fire Department. If applicable, securing additional required local permits may include inspections from the Department of Building and Safety. Once these steps have been completed, DCR will be able to issue the applicant a temporary approval license to operate. It is important to note that DCR has streamlined some of these steps so that they can be done in parallel. Later in this presentation, I will discuss some of the different things that DCR is doing to help expedite the processing of these temporary approval applications. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, when DCR verifies information is complete, DCR will notify the applicant of their application status. At this point, the applicant is authorized to apply for their state license. A number of Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants have already applied to the state, and DCR is in communication with the state agencies. Until DCR has determined all of the documents and forms complete, DCR will not respond to this communication from BCC with a finding of local compliance underway. DCR does have 60 days to provide a response to the BCC before the BCC will reach back out to the prospective applicant. As a reminder, both a local license from DCR and a state license are required to lawfully operate a cannabis business. The state may only issue a license if it does not conflict with local jurisdictions, and they will not issue a license until DCR has notified them that local compliance is underway. At this time, DCR is starting to do initial inspections while we're also reviewing the equity share documents in parallel. Once we have deemed all documents and all forms complete, we will go back to the BCC for the businesses that they have requested and notify them of local compliance underway. This may occur before the applicant receives their official notification from the DCR that local compliance is underway. For purposes of determining whether an applicant has local authorization, state licensing authorities provide the following options. As you can see, first is in compliance, meaning the local jurisdiction has determined that the applicant is compliant with local ordinances and regulations and that the applicant is authorized to engage in requested commercial cannabis activity. The next option is local compliance underway, meaning the local jurisdiction is working with the applicant entity and the local authority authorizes the applicant entity to continue through the state licensing process. This is the point at which folks are working in parallel in the DCR process as well as the state process so that they're working to get their temporary approval licenses or provisional licenses from the requisite entities. The third option is not in compliance, meaning the local jurisdiction has determined that the applicant entity is not in compliance with local ordinances and regulations. The default response is not in compliance until all forms and documents have been deemed complete. So for businesses that are pursuing modification requests that are going to require them to re-upload and submit new forms, please do not apply to the state because we will not be able to review all of those documents and forms and complete the modification request within the 60-day time frame. And we won't be able to mark your application as local compliance underway. The next step in the temporary approval process is for applicants to prepare for their virtual initial inspection. Next slide, please. Applicants should receive the virtual inspection, the virtual initial inspection checklist in preparation of the initial inspection and correct any deficiencies before DCR inspects the business premises. It is the responsibility of the applicant to prepare for and schedule the initial inspection with DCR. At this time, DCR is reaching out to applicants that have submitted all of their forms and documents prior to us completing our equity share review. For businesses that are ready for a virtual initial inspection, those inspections will be scheduled and we will notify you once local authorization underway is granted. For businesses that are not prepared for their initial inspection, DCR will ask when the business expects to be ready for the initial inspection so that we can start identifying the inspection schedule for 2021. We do understand that businesses do have to meet multiple permitting requirements for different city agencies, and the date that you provide us may not ultimately be the date that you're ready for your initial inspection. What we would like to do is make sure that the businesses that are moving through the temporary approval workflow, that have been granted a status of local compliance underway, are positioned to get their inspection as soon as reasonably possible. We do understand that given COVID and everything else, there may be licensing delays, there may be inspection delays, but we are prioritizing all 200 businesses within the temporary approval workflow to move you through this process as expeditiously as possible. And these inspections are being prioritized over other inspections. So to the extent possible, please work with your analyst to let them know when you are ready for your initial inspection. And if we've reached out and you've told folks that you're not going to be ready for several months and it turns out you're ready earlier, it's okay to request an initial inspection at that time. And we will fit you into the calendar, even if that inspection has to be scheduled in the evening or on a weekend. Once DCR has contacted the applicant to schedule a date and time for the inspection, DCR will conduct the virtual initial inspection utilizing our initial inspection checklist. The initial inspection result will either be pass or fail. If passed, the applicant will continue through the temporary approval process and move into the LAFD inspection process. If DCR finds any deficiencies during the initial inspection, which cannot be immediately corrected, it will be documented on the initial inspection checklist, and a copy will be uploaded to the applicant's Excel record within 2 business days of the inspection date. DCR will also prepare and issue an invoice for any additional inspections. Those invoices must be paid within 10 days of the date of issuance. It's important to note that due to operational changes at the Office of Finance, how we invoice applicants is changing, and I'll discuss that later on in this presentation. Once an invoice is generated, DCR will upload the invoice to the applicant's Excel record, and the invoice can be located under the documents section of the Excel record. Sometimes DCR will send out a courtesy email with the invoice attached. Your primary analyst would be the one that sends out any courtesy emails with invoices attached. Of course, payments must also be submitted to the Office of Finance. DCR does not accept and or process any payments from any commercial cannabis business. Applicants are encouraged to visit the virtual inspection requirements document on the website for necessary tools to conduct our inspection. It's a checklist of all of the things that the applicant should have prepared to make sure that the virtual inspection goes smoothly. Next slide, please. DCR is beginning to schedule initial inspections for the Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants that have uploaded all of their required forms and documents. These initial inspections may be scheduled and completed prior to the communication of local authorization underway to the state, provided that DCR has determined that all required forms and documents have been submitted. Currently, DCR is scheduling these initial inspections prior to determining the equity share compliance for the associated documents. So even though folks may be moving through the inspection process, DCR may still be reaching out to get additional information or request the applicant to upload or modify documents previously submitted. DCR will, of course, contact applicants who have completed and submitted all temporary approval documents and forms, other than those specifically required to verify equity share compliance, to inform the applicant that an initial inspection may be requested. After the applicant passes the initial inspection, the business is referred to the Los Angeles Fire Department for scheduling for the fire life safety inspection. LAFD will contact the applicant to schedule a date for inspection. Next slide, please. Prior to the issuance of the temporary approval license, the applicant will need to verify with the Department of Building and Safety that the existing occupancy and or use of the business premises is consistent with the proposed commercial cannabis activity, or obtain a building permit as required by Building and Safety. A building permit is required for any tenant improvements to the business premises, a change of use or occupancy to the business premises, an addition or expansion to the business premises. In addition, building and safety may require that other agencies sign off or provide a clearance on the application prior to the issuance of a building permit. Any changes, permits, or clearances that may be needed can be done in parallel with the temporary approval process. When applicants do reach out to the Department of Building and Safety, commercial cannabis businesses that are in the DCR pipeline, which is all 200 phase 3 retail round 1 applicants, do have access to the cannabis support unit within the Department of Building and Safety. Building and Safety does have dedicated resources to assist commercial cannabis businesses in complying with all of the building code and building permit requirements. If you're not getting the answer you seek with staff at the counter or through their virtual online call center, please ask to speak with somebody from their cannabis expedite unit. They are knowledgeable and they have access to the information to confirm that you are in fact an applicant with the Department of Cannabis Regulation and you are moving through that process and should get access to these expedited services. If you do have problems reaching out to Building and Safety or getting routed to the right inspector or engineer, please reach out to the Department of Cannabis Regulation and your assigned analyst, and we can make sure that your file does get forwarded to the proper inspector or engineer for review. Next slide, please. I just want to quickly recap the temporary approval process. After the applicant completes and passes the necessary inspections and receives their state license, DCR will issue a temporary approval license for the commercial cannabis activities applied for, provided that all requirements are met. Documents associated with the temporary approval process will be mailed and added to the applicant's record through the DCR licensing portal. At this time, the BTRC number assigned to the business entity is not activated until the business entity receives a temporary approval license from the Department of Cannabis Regulation. Once we've notified the Office of Finance that a temporary approval license will be issued, the corresponding BTRC account is activated and the BTRC documents are generated. DCR picks these documents up from the Office of Finance once a week, and then DCR staff mail the BTRC documents as well as the temporary approval licenses out to the applicant. Given the fact that we're transitioning from the 2020 licenses to the 2021 licenses, we will not begin to mail any temporary approval documents until February of 2021 at the earliest. We're currently going through the process of creating the new 2021 licenses as well as generating the requisite forms. So you may receive a temporary approval notification from the department before the department actually has the ability to mail out your 2021 licenses. This information will be uploaded to your DCR licensing portal record to reflect your status. At this point, we've covered different online resources available to assist applicants through the temporary approval application process, including workflows, information and procedure bulletins, video tutorials, as well as walkthroughs of the different forms and documents required for the temporary approval application process, including documents to evidence equity share compliance. Now we will cover how applicants determined eligible for further processing can request to modify their existing applications. Next slide, please. Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 104.03E prohibits applicants or licensees from making modifications to an application or license without obtaining prior written approval from the Department of Cannabis Regulation. Requests to modify applications or licenses must be submitted to DCR using the modification request forms provided by DCR. DCR will review the request to determine if the modification is eligible for further consideration before effectuating any changes to the application record. Today's presentation will share information related to modifying ownership information on the application and modifying business premises location information on the application. Briefly, I will highlight that when an ownership change is submitted to remove the social equity individual applicant, those requests will be rejected at this time. the municipal code prohibits the social equity individual applicant that was the qualifying social equity owner to submit the application from being removed from the application. DCR will only consider modifications to remove the social equity individual applicant after a temporary approval license is issued. DCR may consider ownership modification requests that decrease the social equity individual applicant's ownership percentage, provided that the ownership percentage stays above the minimum percentage amount for the particular license issued. For instance, a number of phase 3 retail round 1 applicants apply to sole proprietors, meaning the social equity individual applicant has 100% of the equity in the business or entity pursuing the license. If that individual chose to sell shares within the corporation, they could sell shares provided they have at least 51% or more of the equity if they're a tier 1 social equity applicant, or they maintain shares above 33 1/3% if they're identified as a tier 2 applicant. Entity substitutions will be authorized only when the applicant is authorized to make the modification on behalf of the entity. This request is made through DCR's entity substitution form. For changing locations, the business premises relocation form may be submitted. However, retail storefront applications may only be relocated within the existing community plan area. Next slide, please. Before sharing specific information about how to go about requesting application modifications, I just want to highlight some of the resources DCR has created to assist applicants through the application modification process. First, DCR is using a registry to manage modification requests from applicants and licensees. To begin the modification request process, all applicants and licensees interested in making a modification to their application or license must first register an intent to file a modification request. DCR has developed a video tutorial to assist applicants and licensees registered to submit their modification request. Applicants seeking additional information on this process are encouraged to view this video. If the modification request is eligible for further consideration, DCR will inform the applicant or licensee and update the status record in DCR's licensing portal. For phase 3 retail round 1 applicants, the status of awaiting data entry, which was the default status that was added once we started asking folks to start uploading their temporary approval forms, does grant the applicant the ability to submit a modification request. So when you look to the right of your application number and record status, if you see the button renew or modify, you have the ability to submit a modification request using that functionality. For entities, whether they're phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, if you submit your request through the registry, DCR will update your status to mod requested, which also grants you the ability to submit a modification record. You will see the same renew or modify button to the right of your application number and status. Both of those statuses do allow for you to submit a formal modification request to DCR. Next slide, please. First, applicants must submit the application modification request cover page, which is illustrated on the left of the slide. This modification cover page may have been uploaded with your temporary approval documents, but it does also have to be uploaded as part of the formal modification request record. The modification records are records that are associated with your parent record within the DCR licensing portal. All fees, all invoices, all supporting documents are going to be uploaded to the modification record. So before DCR can consider and process any modification requests, we do have to have a modification record to work from. Once we've approved modification requests, the changes on the record on the modification record will be applied to the corresponding application or license records within the DCR licensing portal. After a modification record is submitted, DCR will contact the Office of Finance and provide them information that an applicant or licensee is going to have outstanding fees, and notify them that the applicant or licensee will need to request an appointment to pay their fees or have an e-bill generated so that the fees can be paid online. Once finance has confirmed that either an appointment has been scheduled or an e-bill has been generated to allow the applicant or licensee to pay fees online, DCR will issue an invoice. Once DCR has issued an invoice, the applicant or licensee has 10 days to pay their fees. So because finance no longer allows commercial cannabis businesses to do walk-in transactions and appointments must be scheduled in advance, DCR will not issue an invoice until we know the applicant or licensee has the ability to pay. There are certain exceptions to what I just said. However, for phase 3 applicants going through the modification and the temporary approval process, those reasons would not apply. Once the modification record is submitted and the modification review fee of $542 is paid, DCR will begin formally reviewing the modification request. Once we begin our formal review, we may ask for additional forms to be uploaded, and there may be additional fees associated with processing your modification request through completion. Specific modification review request form review fees will be added based on the type of request submitted. These fees differ from modification request to modification request. DCR will also notify the requester of all additional forms and documents that need to be submitted to effectuate the requested modification. These documents will have to be uploaded to that modification record through the DCR licensing portal. Next slide, please. On this slide on the left-hand side, you'll see the application modification workflow for a general request, just how it moves through the process, as well as the information and procedure bulletin. These resources, as well as the previously mentioned video tutorial, should be reviewed in preparation of submitting a modification record. A number of businesses have submitted modification records, and folks have asked for their status. The first group of applicants will be notified to request their payment date or request an e-bill in January of 2021. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to jump into specific, types of modifications. First, I'm going to start with the ownership modification. Again, I just want to reiterate that after submitting an application under section 104.061, which is all of the phase 3 retail round 1 applicants, an applicant should not be permitted to amend its application to remove or replace the individual owner who is the social equity individual applicant as defined under section 104.20A or B. However, after a temporary approval license is issued, DCR may consider an ownership modification request to remove or replace the individual social equity owner, that is the qualifying social equity individual applicant, to another social equity individual applicant who meets the same equity share requirements. All of these changes do require prior written approval of DCR. DCR shall also promulgate rules and regulations for the transfer of control or social equity ownership between social equity individual applicants. Ownership modification requests that do not result in the social equity individual applicant falling below the requisite equity share requirements may be considered at this time, as well as ownership changes for owners that are not the social equity individual applicant. An applicant shall not be permitted to amend its application to remove or replace the individual owner that is the social equity individual applicant at this time. Any request to swap social equity individual applicants is not eligible for further consideration, and you will not be invoiced for any additional fees associated with that type of request. For the entity substitution change, applicants may desire to change the business entity that is currently listed on their application. DCR has created the Phase 3 Application Entity Substitution Form to allow applicants to substitute the applicant business entity on a previously submitted Phase 3 Retail Round 1 application with a different business entity. This form requires the social equity individual applicant to attest under penalty of perjury that the social equity individual applicant is authorized to change the applicant business entity associated with the relevant application and license number, and further attests the social equity applicant is authorized to make the request on behalf of both the business entities involved, the original entity and the entity that is being substituted for the original entity. Applicants must also complete and sign a related indemnification agreement. It is important that before submitting this form, applicants read it carefully, and it is recommended that applicants seek legal advice prior to submitting the form. The removal and/or substitution of the applicant business entity may have legal or business consequences for the social equity individual applicant, depending on your prior business arrangements and individual circumstances. If you need legal assistance, please stay tuned as Dr. Brown will share information on how Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants may receive pro bono legal services through DCR's partnership with the Los Angeles County Bar Association. Next slide, please. Applicants, on this slide, we're going to go ahead and go through the business premises location. Applicants are authorized to submit relocation requests within their existing community plan area. Applicants are not authorized to relocate out of their existing community plan area. Currently, there are no deadlines to relocate or identify a compliant property. Applicants seeking to relocate their business premises should follow instructions previously provided on how to upload their application modification request cover page, as well as complete the business premises relocation illustrated here on the right. If anybody has any questions about what community plan area is associated with their record, they can log into the DCR licensing portal, click on the application, and then look at the licensing details. And you can see on the screen that the community plan area is circled in green, and that will tell you what community plan area you can be in. Next slide, please. So we did send a communication out to all applicants and licensees earlier this week, informing them that commercial cannabis applicants and licensees are required to schedule an appointment with the Office of Finance to remit payments for fees and business taxes. Walk-in transactions are no longer accepted at the Van Nuys branch due to staffing shortages, furloughs, and mandatory public health and social distancing protocols. Effective immediately, businesses without a business tax registration certificate must submit a business tax registration application with their pre-application or public convenience or necessity record. This, of course, does not apply to the 200 Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applications, but for folks that have also submitted either a request for pre-app review or for a PCN record, you will have to have a BTRC number associated with the entity seeking licensure before DCR is able to move you further through the process and or issue an invoice. Business tax registration applications are forwarded to the Office of Finance for processing, and once a BTRC is assigned, we will update your DCR licensing portal record accordingly. On a weekly basis, DCR is providing finance with a list of businesses that require payment appointments. Emails will also be sent to the contacts on the DCR record, notifying them to request an appointment. Once a payment appointment has been scheduled, DCR will then generate an invoice based around that appointment date. Under most circumstances, an invoice will not be generated unless a payment appointment has been scheduled. Next slide, please. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Amani Brown to provide an overview of the Social Equity Program resources.
Thank you, Mr. Kylene, and good morning. I hope that everyone is well. Today, I'd like to cover updates related to the benefits provided by the Social Equity Program, including business licensing and compliance assistance, the financial grant program, and our pro bono legal services initiative. Slide. First, I'll begin with an update on our business licensing and compliance assistance program. BLC refers to educational programming designed to assist and provide business development to social equity applicants. DCR had a robust response to the request for qualifications, or RFQ, for the on-call business development services contract. Contract awards were issued and many bid responses were due on September 21st, 2020. This first RFQ yielded 21 proposals. 12 were accepted, 7 were deemed qualified through the evaluation process. DCR executed 6 contracts. 2 of that cohort group will be issued notices to proceed. Now, notices to proceed is an official authorization to begin work. For the second RFQ, the department received 7 proposals, 6 were accepted, and 6 contracts were executed. 4 of the 6 vendors will be issued notices to proceed to develop and create programming for the Business Licensing and Compliance Initiative. The contract terms are for 1 year with 2 one-year options. Next slide, please. The selected firms will develop programming related to the following scopes of services: cannabis licensing and regulation and permitting, education and training services, general development services, cannabis-specific business development services, cannabis technology business development services, workforce development, job outreach and job placement services, and last but not least, related services. DCR will be conducting surveys throughout this initiative to ascertain the effectiveness of the program and what additional information is most needed in real time for the stakeholder community. Next slide. Now a few updates on the financial grant program. Earlier this year, DCR was awarded a total of $7.8 million from the California Local Equity Grant Program and the Cannabis Equity Grant Programs for local jurisdictions. These resources will be used to provide equity applicants and licensees with startup and ongoing costs for leases, equipment, capital improvements, fees, workforce development, technical assistance, etc. The department recognizes that capital is a major barrier to entry for so many social equity applicants. As such, DCR is dedicating $5 million from the previously mentioned funding sources to social equity applicants for a financial grant program. We are happy to announce that DCR has an executed contract and will be working with Elevate Impact LA, a minority-owned business consulting firm who will design and develop programming for this initiative. We are working through the administrative and requirements for compliance. The department plans to launch the financial grant program early in 2021. Next slide. I'd like to conclude with an update on our partnership with the Los Angeles County Bar Association for pro bono legal services as it relates to our Phase 3 Retail Round 1 social equity applicants. The Los Angeles County Bar Association's cannabis section, in partnership with DCR, has created a pro bono legal assistance program, which will operate through the Bar Association's Smart Law Referral Service for social equity applicants. The goals of this referral resource are to promote fair and equitable participation in the licensed commercial cannabis industry and to foster a level playing field as it relates to access to legal counsel and help deter predatory practices targeting the social equity community. This referral service is available only to social equity applicants who applied in Phase 3 Retail Round 1 and who were determined eligible for further processing under the Los Angeles Municipal Code, Section 104.061B. Depending on demand and availability, these services may be expanded to other applicants in the future. The Los Angeles County Bar Association is currently working to develop the program and is continuing with the recruitment of qualified legal professionals. DCR sent a communication with instructions on how to submit the pro bono legal services survey, along with the legal services authorization agreement for Phase 3 Retail Round 1 social equity individual applicants who have been deemed eligible for further processing, who are interested in receiving limited pro bono services. The survey and agreement are included on the department's website under the Social Equity Program menu. DCR will be sending regular reminders to Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants in the coming weeks about their access to pro bono legal services. We hope to increase social equity application participation in the program, as well as many applicants have expressed a need for legal services, and specifically a desire for additional support as they progress through the temporary approval process. These resources will be made available on a first-come, first-served basis. So applicants are encouraged to return surveys expressing their interest regarding the program as soon as possible. That concludes my presentation. I will now turn it back over to Ms. Plummer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. The department sent out a communication requesting questions from Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants. Many of the questions have been addressed throughout today's presentation. However, there were a few we'd like to specifically address. We've selected some of these questions to answer today. Director Packer and Mr. Colleen will be helping us answer these questions. The first question up is it was answered, so it will be pretty brief to get this one answered. When will I get invoices for modification? When will the virtual inspection be conducted? How long do I have to find a new property? And if I can't find a property in my designated area, may I go outside of my community plan area? Mr. Colleen?
Thank you, Ms. Plummer. I'll go ahead and take that one. First, a registration of intent to modify and a modification record have to be submitted before we begin processing it. As I mentioned, records with the status of awaiting data entry and mod requested have the ability to upload a modification record through the DCR licensing portal. Once a payment appointment has been scheduled, DCR will issue an invoice. For the second question, initial inspections may be scheduled after all required documents and forms are uploaded, but prior to when documents are deemed complete. Specifically, DCR is currently reviewing the equity share documents. However, we do want to allow for folks to have access to the initial inspection process. For number 3, at this time, there's not a deadline for applicants to find a new property. We continue to accept modification requests, and that process will remain open until further notice. And then the last question, applicants are not allowed to submit a modification request to go outside of their community plan area.
Thank you. The next question is, does Phase 3 Retail Round 1 include delivery?
Yes. All retail storefront applicants, once they're granted a license, are eligible to engage in delivery activity at the location associated with their retail storefront license.
Great, thank you. Does DCR intend to prioritize enforcement against illicit dispensaries in lieu of the current ordinance requiring power shutoff and no further criminal prosecution?
DCR does not have jurisdiction over unlicensed cannabis operators. Please submit complaints to the complaint portal, and we encourage folks to use the complaint portal for follow-up purposes, as well as reaching out to their local area station.
Great. Now, I know you addressed this question throughout the presentation, but just as a follow-up, do applicants have to apply for the state license now?
No, but DCR will not grant a temporary approval license until the applicant receives a state provisional license or other form of state license. Currently, the Bureau of Cannabis Control is processing new applications in 4 to 8 weeks. DCR has 60 days to respond to the BCC with a finding of local authorization underway. Businesses that have submitted all required forms and documents may submit their BCC application at this time. However, DCR will not communicate a finding of local authorization underway until all document requirements are met and deemed complete.
Great. And this is one of the last questions or series of questions is, can a phase 3 retail round 1 applicant open for business with a city of Los Angeles license while waiting for the state of California license? I think you just said, answered that a little bit. Or, yeah.
Yeah, so the quick answer is no. All businesses must have both a local and state license to lawfully operate in the city of Los Angeles.
Great. I know a lot of the questions, again, we received today we answered throughout the presentation, and this presentation will be, has been recorded and will be uploaded to the department's website at cannabis.lacity.org. So we're going to encourage all applicants to reference that website for this workshop. If you have additional questions, everybody has an assigned analyst that they can find on all of their paperwork and emails. And I want to just say thank you, Director Packer, Mr. Colleen, and Dr. Brown, and the applicants for joining us this morning. And please reach out if you have any questions. The department looks forward to working with you through this temporary approval process.